Good morning, all. Good morning, all participants. Good morning, Arnab sir. Today, day 11 of webinar series of data science and AI organized by CTech Patna by Dr. Arnab Bhattacharya, from professor from IIT Kanpur. And we are privileged to have you, sir. The topic of the talk today is ensemble methods and their applications in fog prediction. And starting, just giving a brief profile about the sir before we start the session of today. The sir is a professor at Department of Computer Science and Engineering at IIT Kanpur, to which he is affiliated since December 2007. He has received his MS and PhD degrees in computer science from the University of California and in USA in 2007. His current research interest includes database mining, information retrieval, NLP, and AI. Arnab Saraz holds multiple patents and has several publications in reputed journals and conferences. CDEC has also collaborated with Arnab sir in terms of prime skill in AI, and I certainly look forward for the session, sir. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. All right. So thank you again for inviting me for this talk series. Today I'll be talking about ensemble methods and their applications in fog prediction. So since this is a data science series, I am assuming some classifiers, etc., have been already covered. So let me jump into what ensemble methods are. So in general, ensemble, the word ensemble in English means a collection. So what essentially it is being done is that instead of using only one classifier, the ensemble methods combine multiple classifiers. So this is done, of course, because the ultimate aim is to increase classification accuracy. So this is to increase the classification accuracy. Now, the intuition behind ensemble methods is very easy to understand. Is that if there is only one classifier, one single instance of a classifier, it may do a mistake on one particular test object, etc. But it is unlikely that many of them will. And this is the same, philosophy that we use in our daily lives as well, right? So when there is some decision to be taken, we just don't ask one person and go ahead with whatever that person says. We ask multiple persons and then form an informed opinion by asking multiple persons and getting multiple opinions, right? So that is precisely what the ensemble methods try to do. So that's why also called classifier combination methods. So now the question comes is that as soon as you ask multiple classifiers, somebody may say this is class 1, somebody may say this is class 2, somebody may say this is class 3, and so on and so forth. So then what is the final class that you will predict? So that is being done by majority voting. And in this, what is majority voting? As Indians, we should be all very easy to understand what majority voting is. If there are multiple classifiers that says class 1, and then there is only one classifier that says class 2 and only one classifier that says class 3, so then this is majority. So this is what the output is, right? Now, of course, this is a very simple thing where every classifier has got unit vote, but the voting may be weighted as well. And the weighting can be from different things. So we'll see all examples of that. So there are three main types of ensemble methods, the bagging, boosting, and stacking. So bagging and boosting, there is one very important difference between these bagging, boosting versus stacking, is that the bagging and boosting are of the same type, while stacking is of a different type. Now, what do I mean by same type? Same type meaning if you take a classifier, let's say a decision tree, you will use multiple decision trees, but they are all of the same type, meaning they are all decision trees. That is bagging or boosting. As opposed to stacking, where you will probably take one decision tree, then one SVM, one neural network, one something else, so on and so forth, right? So that is the big difference between bagging, boosting versus stacking. So this in general assumes no class imbalance problem. Due to lack of time, I will not go into what exactly happens with the class imbalance problem, but we will assume that there is no class imbalance so that the classes are almost equally represented. What do I mean by that is when you're training the classifier, the number of training samples per class is more or less the same. Of course, it need not be exactly the same, but there is no very big imbalance. That is what. So for all the examples that we will do, we will take the base classifier as a decision tree. Okay. Now I am not sure whether decision trees have been covered or you are all familiar with decision trees. Therefore, I included this. But if you are all familiar with decision trees, please tell me. I'll skip this. Otherwise, I'll spend 2 minutes on time on decision trees. So, are decision trees covered? Should I cover it?
Yes, sir. You should cover it.
Okay.
Yeah. Please cover it.
Okay. So, decision tree is a hierarchical structure used for classification. Maybe let me jump to this example. Okay. So, decision tree. So, this is one example of a decision tree, right? This is for fog prediction that I'll tell you, but later on, this is what is happening. So, basically, fog, we are all familiar with fog is. So, basically, this decision tree is a hierarchical structure. The leaf represents a decision. So, you want to say whether there is fog or not. This is a decision. Each branch represents an outcome. So, and what is an internal node is a test. This is a test. So, let's start from this. So, is wind speed greater than 5? This is a test, right? So, you are measuring the wind speed. Is it greater than 5 kilometers per hour or whatever some units? Okay. Now, the outcome can be either yes or no, right? If the wind speed is actually greater than 5, then you actually traverse this branch. Otherwise, you traverse this branch, right? If it is yes, so essentially you start by testing attribute by attribute. You first test wind speed greater than 5. Maybe it is yes. Then you test relative humidity. Maybe it is no. Then you end up in this branch, in this leaf, sorry. In this leaf, then the prediction is fog. So the decision tree prediction for this is fog, right? So this is the decision tree, okay? Of course, this is, as I said, this is how a test object is done. Very briefly on how a decision tree is being constructed. Of course, I will not go into the details. There is absolutely no time. But ideally, the intuitive way is to find the best attribute to split. So now, when I say best attribute to split, for example, I may have used so many other attributes, but I used wind speed here. So why did I use wind speed? There are some criteria. There are some mathematical criteria. And I found out that wind speed is the best attribute to use here. That is number one criteria. The second is, well, wind speed is fine, but how do I find this constant 5? Again, there are some mathematical criteria to look at it. So you find the best splitting criterion, the best split points, and so on and so forth. So the best attribute to split, then the best splitting point. So best attribute to split here is wind speed, and the splitting criteria here is 5, right? So it's greater than 5 or less than 5. That's it. It can be multiple. This is how a decision tree is constructed. Okay, and then there are of course different measures of impurity to split a node. I mean, those are details that I will not go into. But finally, what happens is that when you reach a leaf, either all the objects in that leaf are in the same class, then you call it a pure, or there may still be some amount of impurity, and then there you recursively keep on building this, right? So this is a top-down method. So you first split all the training objects based on wind speed greater than 5, wind speed less than 5. And then for all the things that is wind speed greater than 5, you then use another attribute, relative humidity, and then you say relative humidity greater than 80, less than 80, and so on and so forth. You keep on doing this. So this is being done recursively, right? So at the end of this, you get what is called a decision tree, right? So you stop when it becomes absolutely pure, or then there are no more attributes to split. There again, there are multiple conditions for this. But that is fine. This is a, by the way, please remember that when I am doing this, I am building one single instance of a decision tree. Okay? One single instance. Fine. So this is top down and backtracking is not allowed. These are all okay. And now let us go back to the ensemble methods. And as I said, the ensemble methods, there are 3 kinds of ensemble methods: bagging, boosting, and stacking. So the first one is called bagging. So the bagging is essentially a short form of, actually it's called bootstrap aggregating. Okay. So here is the basic idea of a bagging. So suppose you start with an initial training set size of D, right? Now, what do I mean by initial training set size of D? Remember, every classifier that you build starts with some training object, right? So you are given some fog event saying that, oh, when the wind speed is this, relative humidity is this, temperature is this, dew point is this, then there was fog. Or when the wind speed is this, this is this, this, then there was no fog, and so on. So you're given a set of such things. Right? That is a training set. So suppose you're initially given D such training examples, right? So now from this D, you create another training set by sampling of the same size D, by sampling with replacement. Now sampling with replacement meaning, basically what you do, you have this set of D things, you pick it up randomly from it, and you keep on picking up D times. With replacement, that means you can pick up an object multiple times. Okay, there is no restriction on how many times you can pick up an object. You just keep on picking it up, and if you keep on doing this randomly, you get another size D training set. So you do this T times. Okay, now for each such sample you can build a classifier. So you have repeated this T times, so you have built T classifiers. So now you have in your hand a set of T classifiers, and you use majority voting, and that simply is called bagging. So what is bagging? Instead of building one instance of a classifier, you build T instances of the classifiers. Now how do you create these T instances? By picking up things in this sampling with replacement manner T times. Okay, that's very simply what is bagging. All right. Now a very big example of bagging for decision trees is called random forests or random decision forest. So as it is, I mean, as you know, forest is a collection of trees. So this is a collection of decision trees. It is a bagging method, of course. So what exactly is a random forest? Okay. So as I said, bagging depends on this method of randomization, right? Like selecting a sample, right? So this random forest utilizes 3 methods of randomization. First is, instead of using all the training examples, it uses a random subset of the training example. So even if I give you 100 fog events, you will not use 100 fog events. Maybe you will use some 90 fog events, right? Some random subset. Then the next is random subset of features. So even if I give, let's say, 4 features per training objects, I'll tell you what the temperature is, I'll tell you what the humidity is, I'll tell you what the wind speed is, I'll tell you what the dew point temperature is. You will randomly use not all 4 features, but let's say 3 of them. So sometimes you will leave out relative humidity, and sometimes you will leave out temperature, so on and so forth. So that's a random subset of features. And the third method of randomization is that you select a random rank. Now, what does it mean by a random rank? Remember, as I said, there is a splitting criteria, or splitting attribute and splitting criteria for decision tree, right? And you will always pick the best there. So the splitting, I mean, there are some mathematical formula which will tell you that, oh, wind speed is the best attribute to pick, and 5 is the best constant to pick. That's the best. That means it's the top 1. Now, instead of top 1, you may randomly pick, saying, no, we'll avoid the first one. I'll pick the second best. So that is the top case, the top 2, right? So you will not pick the best, but randomly select maybe the second best or the third best or something. So that will create another decision tree, right? So all these 3 methods creates multiple sets of decision trees. So all that collection is a random forest. That's all. So random forest is nothing new. It's still a decision tree, but multiple decision trees. That's all. And then you finally do a majority voting on the output of the decision trees to decide the class. That's it. Okay. So I mean, this finishes bagging. So if there are questions, please do stop me. All right, fine. So I'll move on to boosting. So again, boosting is using classifiers of the same type. Remember bagging. So a random forest uses only decision trees, right? So decision trees are all of the same type. So similarly, boosting is again classifiers of the same type. and this is majority voting again, it may use weights. Of course, it does use weights, but more importantly, the models are not built independently. One big important thing for bagging is that the models are built independently. So once a sample is given, the model does not look at what the other models have done. It is just goes ahead independently, right? In boosting, it is not so. It is built rather successively on this, right? So what does that mean? Is that here is the idea: is that you first build a model, and then you look at in what cases these models are not doing so well. What are the errors in that? So then the next model tries to concentrate more on the things that are erroneous. Okay. So essentially, what you are trying to say is, I mean, if you have a student, this is what we are doing, right? This is what we generally do, right? So we study all the chapters, and then we take a mock test and find out that, oh, no, chapter 2, I am a little weak. So then you read chapter 2 a little bit more the next time. And then probably you will find out next that, oh, chapter 5 is still also a little weak. Then you will concentrate on chapter 5 a little bit more, right? So you are actually building on your previous experience. So that is what boosting is, okay? So again, these are of the same size D, and again, this is done with sampling with replacement. But in bagging, it was all independently. I mean, the samples were all picked up independently. Here, this is not picked up independently, the training samples, but based on how much error that you have done. And let's go to the one particular method, which is called the AdaBoost. AdaBoost is one of the most popular boosting algorithms. So each training object is weighted, right? So that means each chapter is weighted. So initially you have no idea. So you spend the same amount of time on each chapter, right? So you spend 1 hour of time on chapter 1, 1 hour of time on chapter 2, 1 hour of time on chapter 3, and so on and so forth. All the 10 chapters, let's say, of a book, you spend all of that. Then you find out that chapter 2 you have not done well. So the next time, instead of spending this 1 hour on each one of them, you may be spending 50 minutes on the other chapters and maybe 1.5 hours on chapter 2, right? Basically, your total time that you can spend is, let's say, fixed. So it's still 10 hours. So you'll spend a little bit less from each one of them, and you will spend a little bit more on this chapter 2. So that is what precisely this is being done. So I'll send you the slides. You can look at the mathematics later on, but that's what the idea is, okay? So essentially, models are successively built by modifying the weights. Now, this is modifying the weights, right? Because so chapter 1 initially was 60 minutes. Chapter 2 initially was 60 minutes. Chapter 3 initially was 60 minutes, and so on and so forth. And now you said that, no, I need to concentrate more on chapter 2. So you made this 50. You made this 50. Now you have a total budget of 180 minutes, right? So you have spent only 100 minutes here. So you can, so you can spend 80 minutes here. So you see this automatically, that means that this is spending more weight, right? So that's the thing. So if a training object is correctly classified, so chapter 1 and chapter 3, you have done most of the questions correctly, its weight is decreased. So from 60, you're decreasing the weight 50. As soon as you decrease the weight of the correctly classifying things, automatically the weight of the other things increases because the total is constant. Okay, so that's the idea of AdaBoost. So the same this thing. So there is a little bit more that you can think of this updating the weights. So there is the error classification and E into 1 minus E, and these are mathematics. So it's not so important of the exact mathematical formulation, but the idea is what is important. Okay. Again, so now let me go to this example of a boosting for decision tree that is called a gradient boosting decision tree, GBDT. So it's a boosting algorithm on decision trees. Just like random forest is a bagging algorithm on decision trees, GBDT is a boosting algorithm on decision trees. Okay. So now when I say gradient boosting thing, so there is something called a gradient, right? What is the gradient? So this is being used for regression kind of thing. So with regression meaning, see, I want to predict fog, but as we will see later on, what really is fog? Fog is visibility. So how much can you see in terms of, say, kilometers? So whether I can see 1.2 kilometers, whether I can see 0.7 kilometers, etc. So what this is trying to do is to predict exactly how much can be seen, let's say 3 hours from now, etc. So suppose this model predicts, oh, I will be able to see 1.2 kilometer. And then the actual data saying, no, this is 1.1 kilometer. So y is actually 1.1 kilometer and the prediction was 1.2 kilometers. So what is the gradient? This is essentially the error term. So 1.1 minus 1.0. So this is minus 0.1, right? This is the gradient. So, and you can see the larger this error term, the more wrong this this particular decision tree is, right? So you need to concentrate more on such things, right? So more on this sample. So larger this sample. So when you say this was 1.2 kilometers and this was 1.1, that's a large, I mean, that's a 0.1 error. But suppose there was something, you said 1.3 and actually this was 2.5. Then this is an even larger error, right? So that means this is even wrong. For this sample, this is even more wrong. So you need to concentrate on this sample even more than what you need to concentrate on this, because this is more or less okay, right? And suppose something is 1.8 kilometers and you predicted exactly 1.8 kilometers. So there is actually no error. So you need not worry about this training sample at all, right? Because you have got it correctly, right? So that's the idea of this gradient boosting decision tree. So this gradient y minus y hat, this error is what is being used as a weight for the next step. Okay. So this, I mean, again, so the successive trees, so you keep on building trees. The first decision tree, you find the residuals. These are called residuals. The successive trees tries to fit the residuals, so tries to minimize this thing. And the samples with more errors, that means higher residuals, this higher this value, these get more weight, right? So you need to concentrate more and more. So keep on doing this till there is a stopping criteria. Okay, fine. So that's about it. I'll also cover very briefly on stacking. Stacking or stack generalization. This is for different types. Okay. So what is a different type? So let me jump to a example. I mean, this is jump to a. So you have certain classifiers. So maybe this is a decision tree. Maybe this is an SVM. Maybe this is an artificial neural network, and so on and so forth. So you have different classifiers at this level 0. Now this classifier, let's say this predicts class 1, this predicts class 3, some other thing predicts class 2, this predicts class 2, so on and so forth. So this is the outcome of this individual classifier. Now the stacking says that you put in this another classifier at this level called the arbiter at this D1 level. So what is the input to the arbiter? The input to the arbiter are these values. So class 1, class 3, class 2, class 2, right? So it is not the training examples any further. It is just the classes of those training examples. So now what does the arbiter will do? The arbiter will essentially says that, okay, I have got one class 1, I have got one class 3, I have got two class 2s, okay? What should I output? Maybe it will output class 2. So this class 2 is what this is outputted here. So remember again once more, what is this arbiter is doing? The arbiter is looking only at these classes, not on from where they have come, not on how they have done, nothing else. Right? That is called stacking. So there are some individual training examples that is feed to the individual base classifiers. The outputs of them are trained. So, right, so it's very important to say that these outputs are what is being trained in the second level, right? So that's called stacking. Okay. Of course, this cannot be just with decision trees or this thing. This can be used with multiple. Okay. All right. So that finishes about this ensemble method. So any questions on this?
Sir, one question has been put on chat box by Srinivasan sir.
Can you please read it because I cannot see the chat
Yeah.
box.
Okay. So what he want to ask is, in gradient boosting tree and others, weight is adjusted on absolute number of errors or percentage of errors?
Oh, no. Okay, very good question. Okay, let me go back. So the weight is of a sample. Okay, now what do I mean by a sample? Okay, this is a good question. So let me see. So I have this, let's say 5 balls, right? And from these 5 balls, I want to create another sample of 5 objects, right? What do? I randomly pick up this ball and I get this, right? Then I randomly pick up this ball and I get this. Then maybe I randomly pick up again this ball, so I get another copy of this. Then maybe I pick up this ball, I copy of this. Maybe I pick this up again and I get another, right? So this is one way of sampling. Now, when I was picking up these balls, I treated all of them equally meaning with equal weight, right? That is what your bagging does. Now, in boosting, what it does is that I have these 5 things, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But I have used already a classifier on this, say classified, so decision tree 1. And the decision tree 1 has some residual for this object, some residual for this object, some residual for this, some residual for this, some residual for this, right? So suppose the residual for this is larger, right? And suppose the residual for this is smaller. So, and again, my aim is to create another 5 things with this thing. So now, when I'm picking this, I will pick this with more probability than this. So this will have a higher probability than this. Why? Because this has got more error. Okay, that is a higher probability of picking that sample. Now, what do I mean by higher probability of picking that sample? Now, think of a dice, right? Think of a dice which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then let's say it is not a uniform dice that we play in Ludo, but suppose you load the dice such that there is more chances of 6 coming than 1, right? So then you use that dice and I say that if 6 comes, then I pick up this, and if 1 comes, I pick up this. Now, since there are more chances of 6 coming, there is more chance that this will be picked up, more number of times than this, right? So that is how this boosting is being done, right? Got it? So it's the probability of picking up this sample when you are creating this. So this is the difference between bagging and boosting, right? So this is bagging when everything is with equal probability. But equal probability doesn't mean that something does not get twice. That may still happen. But in boosting, you are actually changing the probabilities, right? You are actually making this a larger probability than this. Okay? Good question. So, but yeah, does that answer it?
Srinivasan sir has said how much more?
How much more what?
Can you quantify it? He's saying, can you quantify
Oh yes,
it?
I can quantify it. So that's the thing, right? So definitely I can quantify it. So okay, if we go back, you quantify it precisely using this formula. So the new weight is the old weight times E into 1 minus E, where E is the error. Where E is the error. So whatever error metric that you use, it's E into 1 minus E. That is exactly what you do this. That is for AdaBoost, of course. For gradient boosting, again, the error is the gradient. So you do that. So, but there is, of course, I mean, I'm skipping the mathematics because, I mean, the intuition is much more important. The mathematics can be found in any book, anywhere. That is not, but the important part is the intuition. Once you get the intuition, you can do all of this. Is that fine?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's right.
Okay, good. Thank you for the questions. I mean, if there is more questions, please, I'll be happy. because I have finished the most technical part of the talk, and I'll just show you some this thing. So basically, we have used it very successfully for fog prediction. Now, what is fog? We all have some idea, but there is a precise definition from this what you say, the climatologists, etc. So it's a suspension of very small, usually microscopic water droplets that reduces the visibility. Right. So fog is essentially about reduction of visibility. So fog is measured by using this visibility only. Right. So when you say there is a lot of fog, you actually mean that you cannot see much. Right. That is how it is being measured. Okay. So it is about horizontal visibility, and when this is 1 kilometer or less, then we call it fog. Okay, it has to be 1 kilometer or less. That is more or less the standard definition, and therefore the IMD classification is that there are different kinds of fog. Right, there's a light fog which is 500 to 1000 meter, moderate 200 to 500, thick 550 to 200, and very thick 0 to 50. So what the fog prediction or classification or regression method will try to do is will not only try to tell you that there will be fog, but exactly how much fog, whether it's a thick fog or light fog or very thick fog, etc. Because as you can imagine and as you know, this has got a lot of motivation for the transport. So for the railways, for the flights, etc. So if you start a flight now, and if I can predict 3 hours from now, this will be the fog, you will know whether to start the flight at all, because whether you can land it in that destination airport, which facilities should I use, etc. That is a very, very useful problem. So that's the thing. Of course, Indian Railways uses a different classification, but that's all right. And we targeted mostly North India because fog is extremely common in North India in winter, especially the Ganga Yamuna plains. And I mean this entire Gangetic plain, and here is one snapshot from a satellite. So you can see this is very heavy fog. This the white portion. This is actually a satellite picture. So this extreme fog. So we would like to see, and this transportation service gets severely affected. There are accidents, etc. So the prediction problem, we took Lucknow airport data just because we are in Kanpur and that's nothing much. And what we tried to do is, so we used different meteorological parameters. So visibility is what we try to predict or whatever, and then we use temperature, dew point temperature, relative humidity, wind pressure, wind speed, pressure, all of these things. And our task was to predict visibility after 3 hours and 6 hours. So this is called nowcasting. Nowcasting meaning now. You want to say exactly what will happen in 3 hours of time, not next week. That is a long-term forecasting, but we are interested in the short-term forecasting because of this. The transportation, the airport, and all of these things, and accidents and everything. So that is called the nowcasting problem. So just to expand it a little bit more. So given the parameters and the current visibility at time t, we want to predict or classify the visibility at time t plus 3 hours or t plus 6 hours. That's precisely the problem statement that we worked on. Now, more importantly, we worked with a host of machine learning data science models, lots of regression models, lots of classifier models, lots of different kinds of models. And the results that we got for the regression, you see, we always got the best results for this GBDT for this task one. GBDT is the gradient boosting decision tree, so it's a boosting type of thing. And then for the classification, we got the AdaBoost. Again, it's another kind of boosting mechanism. And then for the no fog or this kind of thing, we again got GBDT. So basically, the whole point is that, sorry. So that instead of the individual models, the ensemble models gave us the best results. And this is a real study using real data from 1977 to 2019. We did that, and then we took slices of 2010 to 2019 as well. Real data and real, atmospheric parameters of this thing, and the ensemble methods were doing better than the individual methods. So that's the this. So, and these are all just these things. I don't want to go over this. This is just in case you wanted to do. And we have this website fog.iitk.ac.in where we are disseminating, or we are predicting fog in a real time basis. So we were doing it all through the winter months. Of course, now the machine is down, COVID affected. The entire campus is shut down. We can't maintain the server. The server is in some different things. We are all shut down, locked out. So the right now, this thing is probably not working. But if you note down these things, this should be working in 1 month of time. Hopefully, when the COVID, this thing is gone down. So this is a real-time dissemination. So you can actually find out fog, and it's not just Lucknow. So this website contains for different cities of India. Okay. So and we have live prediction. We can also compare cities. So how is the fog in Lucknow versus how is the fog in Patna versus how is the fog in Delhi? You can do that. We have historical prediction data, how we did in the past. And then we are also setting up our own this thing in IIT Kanpur. We are setting up our own fog monitoring station. Again, things are in pause mode because of this COVID thing, but this will be done. Okay. So for this fog study, we have a team of different professors, students, research engineers, and all of these things. And here are the names of them. So I acknowledge all of them wholeheartedly. Shivam Tripathi, Professor Shivam Tripathi from Civil, Professor Mahendra Verma from Physics, and I am from Computer Science. We are working, and then there are different students, etc. So, thank you.
Thank you, Sid. Thank you for the talk. A great overview and thoroughly covered this topic in the time given to you. And we have questions, sir, if you can see on chat.
Sure. Now I can see the question. So let me go ahead.
Yeah, okay.
So, okay. Weight is adjusted. Okay, that is, can you quantify it? So is it not a CV computer vision problem? Yes, you can think of this as a computer vision problem as well, in the sense that you can take satellite pictures and try to predict it. But this is horizontal visibility, remember. So the visibility is actually measured using this computer vision thing. So you actually have these two, what do you say? There is a camera, there is a light source and there is a receiver. So you actually send thing and you measure how much the light intensity has lost. That is how you measure predictability. But what we want to do is to predict what will happen in T+3 hours. You cannot have a picture of that, right? We are wanting to predict what will happen. So that is not a computer vision problem. So the prediction part is a data science machine learning problem. Okay. I hope I answered Shashank Puntamkar's question. Thank you. Okay. Then there is a question that does COVID affect fog or fog prediction? Well, it does not in the, not the science way, but affects in the sense that we are all down. The machine is not up, the models are not running, students are not here, we cannot access the servers. That is the thing. Of course, I don't think there is any connection of COVID to fog predictions. But I cannot, I wanted to show you the fog.iitk, but I cannot. That's it. There is slide number 16. What is ASOS? Okay. Let me go back. Oh, acha. These are the sensors. Okay. ASOS or AWOS. So these are the weather, these sensors, right? So these sensors actually, as I showed you the satellite picture, the sensors are actually, this is metadata, satellite data. So they actually send rays from the sensor down to the ground. And what comes back is what they measure, and therefore they can create this pseudo image. This is not a real image, by the way. They create this pseudo image because they can do this even at night. So these are infrared and all of this. So ASOS or AWOS are sensors, actual sensors.
Actually, I want to say something.
Sure, please.
I'm Ramakrishnan here. I was former DGC DAC. I found two things very interesting about your talk. Thank you so much. It was a very inspirational talk. One is, you used the word somewhere in the middle of your talk, the word called intuition,
Yes.
which made me, there are three ways of solving a problem. One is analytical, simply calculation, equations. Second is models, which are numerical analysis, which you do, HPC guys do. Third is this new thing that has come about based on uh, your AI methodology. Now, to me, the way you nicely elaborated, built up the topic, to me it looks like a bit of a way human beings does. We do trial and error. So in a sense, the computer is very fast. It is a lot of compute power. So it is also trying to do the way we doing trial and error. Start some initial conditions and finds out I'll calculate if it is, of course, actual solution is, let us say, 21. I reach it as 18. Oh, there's a difference. So how much is the difference? 3. I quickly change the multiplication table or whatever is the thing and come down to, say, let us say 20. Then at some time it spills over to 22. Then I do some interpolation technique and reach 21. So in a sense, computer does the so-called trial and error. I thought in my mind that what it does is, except the point is, the model or whatever you use, that is slightly different in different ways of statistical model. We can two different people in the same, say, coaching class, IIT coaching class. They are trying to do the trial and error in a very different ways. And they diagram. One person does one.
Hello. Hello.
Yes, sir.
I kind of lost.
So this is one observation I would have. Second is, sorry. Please go ahead.
I missed the last part of the comment because probably network issues, etc. But you are right. I mean, this is how things it. So I mean, just one thing about when I say intuition, there are two ways of understanding something that is happening. One is, of course, you go into the gory details of mathematics. You start with equation analytically, try to solve, etc. And then you say, oh, sine theta by cos theta is tan theta. I must remember. So tan inverse is this, that, all this. The other is, you form an idea of what you're going to do. So you have a triangle. There is a height, there is a base, etc. And there is some measurement, some angles, etc. So you have this idea. Then you can probably, if you get this idea correctly, you can probably work out the mathematics later on or ask a computer to help you, etc. But the intuition is very important to have a grasp of what is happening in general. If you start, I have always found that if you start by, if you're understanding a new topic and start by looking at the mathematics, you will try to memorize the mathematics and you will not be able to innovate around it. Right? Because you will remember sine by cos is tan. If I tell you what is sec theta, you said, oh, I have never heard it. I have just no idea. But if you understand that this is a triangle and then there are angles and then this is how things do, you will probably be able to find it out. Maybe, of course, may or may not be, but at least you have a chance. So the same thing happens for computer science data models, right? I can tell you exactly what is AdaBoost. I can tell you the formula. I can even give you the code, Python code, etc. And you will say, oh, very nice. I'll use AdaBoost for my next problem. If it works, fantastic. I don't have to do anything. But if it does not work, then you have just no idea how to modify it. But if you understand the principle, the intuition behind why AdaBoost is supposed to be working, why the ensemble methods are supposed to be working, then you can figure out that, okay, maybe this is something I need to change. Maybe instead of that E by 1 minus E, I maybe need to do E square by 1 minus. Maybe I'll just try to see why that is being done. You understand? So that's the intuition part. The other part, of course, is computers are just to help you get to that this thing, right?
Is this the reason why people say in AI how it arrives at a particular solution? A theorem provenance. That people are saying is a big problem. And that is a fundamental problem. People are saying, like the way ethics. This is also, you don't know how the diagnostic, I have a cancer. but a computer tells me it's a cancer.
Yes.
But people don't know how computer is it. How do I trust it? So that seems to be a problem because of this uncertainty. It doesn't tell you how it arrived at it.
Precisely. So there are two things. One is this accuracy, the other is explainability, right?
Exactly.
Explainability is extremely important in medical things, legal things, etc. As you said, I say you have a cancer. You'd like to question, why do you think there is cancer, right? You will have to explain that because I see those cells are growing at this rate, and this is not normal in the sense that I have seen 100 patients before it. Nobody has that. And so these kind of things. Explainability. Legal. So there is a big debate between these legal practitioners and the AI people. AI people say, oh, please, we will tell you what should be the judgment. And the legal say, no way. You have to tell me why, not what. What is least important? Why and how? How have we arrived at it? So that's exactly the importance. And I mean, just one, so while we are on that point, there is something that I'd like to specify. For the data scientist, the domain is extremely important. Understanding the domain. So what you are working with. So for example, if you're working with cancer or legal thing, you must be understanding the domain. What is it? So otherwise, you will do what I call blind data science. You will have these models, you will apply them computers, and you say, oh, my answer is 21. 3 times 7 is 21. Why it is 3 times 7 is 21? And what will be 4 times 7? Oh, say, give me another month. I will run another supercomputer simulation, right? That doesn't work. You must be understanding the domain well. And therefore, I mean, any successful project, you will always see that there are domains. So for example, in Shivam Tripathi, professor from civics, he knows these parameters. Professor Mahendra Verma from physics, he knows how atmosphere things are working. And I am from the data science part. So that's why this domain is very, very important. Yes, sorry, you were saying something.
I was going to ask you, has the explainability problem has been conquered? Explainability?
No. And the more complex the model is, the less explainable is it, right? So if I give you one decision tree, that is explainable. I'll tell you fog because wind speed was greater than 5 and relative humidity is less than 80, right? Now, if I tell you, if I give you a random forest and said you fog, I said, oh, it is fog because out of my 100 decision trees, 59 of them said fog. Which 59? I'll say in one of them, they use wind speed less than 5. In one of them, they use wind speed less than 3. I mean, come on. I mean, the explainability is lost, right? What is actually happening? I don't know. But I can tell you that this is fog. And I'm right more number of times. So this is classic problem of accuracy versus explainability. Right? So, I mean, the more complex the model is, the less explainable is it. So there is a big research going on in machine learning, how to make models that are both more accurate and more explainable. That's the thing.
I have one more comment, but I think somebody else has a question or a comment.
No, please go ahead.
Okay. See, when you mentioned about this ensemble, I was reminded in 2003, 2004, in high performance computing, they use exactly like the way you talk about fog, the weather, climate, those kind of things. Modeling is very much used. So IIT Delhi, CDAC, and then the Ministry of India Meteorological Department, different people use different model and arrive at different solutions. So the question came, but then none of them were so good solutions. So Department of Science and Technology gave us a project. Hey, why don't you run all of those models and do this ensemble approach and tell us what's the result? It so happened that approach gave us very promising results. Very promising results. So I was just reminded of that. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I mean, yeah. So this is what again, for me, I think the ensemble method has a very nice intuition from our daily lives, right? When you are faced with a tough decision, you just don't ask one person and take it. You actually ask multiple persons and then you weight them based on how they have fared. Past, right? I mean, an example that I can remember from my school days, not school days, rather college days, is that if a new movie comes out, I will ask my friends, have you watched this movie? How is it? Then there will be some people who will say all movies are good. And then there will be some who will say all movies are bad. So their decision, I mean, their what do you say, decision is very less. The weight of that decision is very less. And then there are some very critical things, and I know there are some friends whose mindset is more like me. If they say this is a movie worth watching, then probably I will go and spend money. If they say no, you can pass it, then I'll probably not. So, but I will still ask multiple people and I will weight them, right? So that's what I mean. Again, this is real life that way.
Thank you. You are a very good teacher. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Arnab sir, for the talk and this interaction between our ex-DG Ramki sir and our expert, Dr. Arnab, was more learning experience for us. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
All right.
All participants for joining in.
Thank you.